Guys, I'm back. Don't hate me. I had a topic that I wanted to make a longer video on because I think it's very useful, very interesting to me, but very prevalent in everything that is happening in our country today, unfortunately. I tried to change up my background a little bit to give you guys more to look at because sometimes I like that personally, and as you can tell, I'm a plant and trinket girly to the max, so... but the thing I wanted to talk about is Jerry Falwell Sr. and how he impacted the Christian nationalism that we see today in the current world and everything that's happening. Because a lot of this stuff I didn't know. And the reason I went down this rabbit hole is because I watched two documentaries. The one is called God Forbid, and it's actually about Jerry Falwell Sr.'s son, Jerry Falwell Jr. And the God Forbid documentary is about his scandals and why he had to step down as president of Liberty University, because he became obviously president of Liberty University after his father passed away. 10 out of 10, recommend that documentary. I learned a lot of stuff I did not know. I've always kind of had beef with Liberty University, but I didn't know how deep it went. It was even like a lot worse than I thought. And I also watched a documentary called Apocalypse in the Tropics, which is also so interesting because you get to see how authoritarianism uses evangelicalism specifically, like they're doing here, to gain authoritative power. And so I highly recommend that one as well. It's very eye-opening. And it just kind of shows us that history is just constantly repeating itself. And it's really frustrating and sad, and I feel like for people who see that cycle happening over and over again and seeing people fall into it over and over again. But let's get started. If it seems like I'm reading, it's because I wrote everything down. I wanted to make sure that I have everything correct and in the order that I want, so bear with me. Jerry Falwell Sr., white evangelical, Baptist pastor, televangelist, conservative activist. He founded Lynchburg Christian Academy in 1967. Now, this academy was in direct result of the desegregation of schools. He did not like that. He did not like the desegregation of schools, so he founded his own school where he could keep the black kids out and have it a white-only school. And he did this in the name of his religious freedoms. He also said parents should have the right to choose schools that align with their values, which was racism, and to preserve their specific religious teachings, among other things. I'm interested to know what those specific religious teachings are, because I'm not exactly sure what they're referring to. Then in 1956, he founded the Thomas Road Baptist Church. This eventually became a megachurch, and it's still a church today. It's closely affiliated with Liberty University, and to my understanding, they'll do like graduation ceremonies and stuff there a lot of times. And again, he founded Liberty University in 1971 along with Elmer L. Towns. And like I said earlier, when he died in 2007, Jerry Falwell Jr. became president of Liberty University.
Falwell Jr. was one of the first people to give an endorsement to now President Trump. After Falwell's endorsement, Trump tweeted that Falwell Jr. was one of the most respected religious leaders in the nation. Falwell continued to actively campaign and even said he turned down the position of Secretary of Education,
despite later resigning due to his scandals. Jerry Falwell Sr. also founded the Moral Majority, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, in 1979. This is a Christian conservative political organization. It is responsible for around 2/3 of the votes for Ronald Reagan in the 1980 election when it comes to the evangelical vote. A lot of those votes were attributed to the Moral Majority, which he founded. Jimmy Carter said that they spent $10 million in advertising to say that he was a traitor to the South and no longer a Christian. Which I found this to be interesting because I didn't know that before this, Jimmy Carter actually had the majority vote from evangelicals in 1976, but then they switched sides during the next election. So obviously, Falwell Sr. had some very strong feelings about segregation. He defended racism and segregation through Christian fundamentalism. Falwell Sr. believed segregation and Jim Crow laws were God's will, and he expressed his contempt for the decision that the Supreme Court made in 1954 in regards to Brown versus Board of Education, which obviously this had to do with desegregating public schools. It was said now that segregation of public schools was unconstitutional. Talk about some of Falwell's sermons, because he actually gave sermons on why he believed in segregation and racism, basically. So I'm going to quote from one of his sermons. This sermon is from the 1950s. It's titled Segregation or Integration, which he said, if Chief Justice Warren and his associates had known God's word and had desired to do the Lord's will, I am quite confident that the 1954 decision would never have been made. The facility should be separate. When God has drawn a line of distinction, we should not attempt to cross that line. So he believed, apparently, that God made a distinction between the races and, segregation was God's will. Another quote he made was, "The true, insert N-word here, does not want integration. He realizes his potential is far better among his own race." Trying to make it less about his racism and more, oh, this is what Black people actually want. It's not just about me, which is absolutely insane. I also want to talk about some of his other controversies. On a show, The 700 Club, he blamed 9/11 on groups of people he didn't approve of.
This is the first time that we've been attacked on our soil. First time, and by far, the worst results. And I fear, as Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, said yesterday, that this is only the beginning, and with biological warfare available to these monsters, the Husseins, the Bin Ladens, the Arafats, what we saw on Tuesday, as terrible as it is, could be minuscule if in fact God continues to lift the curtain and allow the enemies of America to give us probably what we deserve.
Well, Jerry, that's my feeling. I think we've just seen the antechamber to terror. We haven't even begun to see what they can do to the major population. I mean,
the ACLU's got to take a lot of blame for this.
Oh, yeah.
And I know I'll hear from them for this, but throwing God successfully with the help of the federal court system, throwing God out of the public square, out of the schools. The abortionists have got to bear some burden for this, because God will not be mocked, and when we destroy 40 million little innocent babies, we make God mad. I really believe that the pagans and the abortionists and the feminists and the gays and the lesbians who are actively trying to make that an alternative lifestyle, the ACLU, People for the American Way, all of them who try to secularize America, I point the finger in their face and say, you helped this happen.
Well, I totally concur.
He literally blames these groups of people for 9/11. I guess it was God punishing us for their evil, wicked ways. Crazy to blame 9/11 on them. This, I'm sure, is not a shock from everything I've said so far. He really did not like gay people. He hated, it even went so far that he hated the Teletubbies. And he specifically hated Tinky Winky. He said that this was written in the National Liberty Journal article, which was attributed to Falwell Sr. He thought Tinky Winky, I wish I didn't laugh at this Tinky Winky thing, but when I first read it, I was like, are you serious? Because I actually didn't know this was a thing, that conservatives, some evangelical conservatives, did not like Teletubbies because they thought they were like demonic or promoting the gay agenda. I had no idea, because I watched it all growing up. I just had no idea. He said that Tinky Winky was a homosexual role model, and I just thought it was so funny to me that besides the part that that's extremely hateful, that he basically called Tinky Winky a gay icon.
Yes, Queen, slay, slay, slay your enemies, raise up your army.
He said his purple color, the gay pride color, and his antenna is shaped like a triangle, the gay pride symbol. They didn't like that Tinky Winky carried around a purse. I don't actually remember the purse, but I'll take their word for it, I guess. Jerry Falwell said, role modeling the gay lifestyle is damaging to the moral lives of children. That was just the weirdest thing to me. Now I want to talk about the moral majority, which I talked about earlier, and how that has shaped the Christian nationalism that we see today. So the moral majority was, again, established in 1979 in response to the cultural changes within the United States. So civil rights movement, women's rights, gay rights. They did not like seeing these cultural shifts, obviously, because they wanted to keep their traditional values, and we know that a lot of religion has to do with conformity, so if you're different than the conformity they want you to have, it's an issue, obviously. He also founded the moral majority with other evangelical leaders. He just really wanted to intertwine religious and cultural beliefs with politics. Before this, there were a lot of evangelicals, a lot of religious people in general, who were completely okay with the separation of church and state. But basically what Falwell was trying to do is convince a lot of these evangelicals and Christians that it was like their divine duty to integrate religion into politics.
First of all, America has surrendered to her internal moral rot. We attend Hollywood's theater. I haven't been to one in 42 years, and if I live another 42 years, I won't attend another one. And when I stopped going 42 years ago, they were like Sunday school literature compared to what's out there now. We watch TV's garbage and smile at their dirty, filthy jokes. We rent the R-rated videos. We smile at their blasphemy. Our mothers are watching the soap operas in the afternoon and learning how to, in a sophisticated way, run around with their husbands. We smile at their blasphemy. We accept the appointment of perverts to high government posts. We throw up our hands and surrender and say there's nothing we can do about it. We're going down the tube. Let's just try to do a little damage control. Well, that's where we are today. But I want to tell you the situation is not hopeless. Now, this is important. The situation is not hopeless. America can be restored. Now, I know the coming of the Lord is the blessed hope. That's the only real cure. But between now and then, according to Joel chapter 2 and other verses and chapters in the Bible, we can expect a biblical revival in the last days before the trumpet sound.
And it had a huge impact, and he really did convince a lot of people that it wasn't good to have separation of church and state like they were previously okay with. So this movement obviously catered to evangelicals. They also tried to appeal to Catholics and Jewish people, but it was very like evangelical coded. He had a huge, like I talked about earlier, he had a huge impact on Ronald Reagan being elected. This included using television, direct mail, calling people, hotlines, rallies. Some key issues was about bringing prayers back in school, which we see today all the time. Them trying, and Texas is putting the 10 Commandments into every public school classroom, each individual classroom, demanding that teachers do this, which is pretty crazy. He also wanted to fight back when it came to what we already talked about, abortion rights.
Roe v. Wade, 21 years ago, the United States Supreme Court by a 7-2 vote decided unborn babies are not human beings and you may butcher them and slaughter them at will. It's called abortion. Terrible thing. And 25, 30 million babies are dead because of it. We've declared war and God's judging us.
Equal Rights Act. He also was really pushing for the death penalty, which I just find it ironic that always like pro-life people are they just constantly want the death penalty. It's very bizarre that they want to play God, but they claim that like God only has the ability to do so many different things, but they think they can play God by taking away people's lives. Very weird to me and very contradicting to me.
100% true. They use the guillotine.
Until 77?
Yeah.
That's so cool.
There's videotape of it.
Honestly, that's like what we should be doing. And I agree. It should be public
And
should be public
televised.
square.
By the way, you could sell. You could fund
Force
the
kids
government
to watch it.
You could have like brought to you by Coca-Cola. And
Now, the moral majority dissolved in the late 80s, but obviously its impact did not. We're seeing it so much today, now more than ever. This version of like Christian nationalism, especially the like evangelicalism twist to it. Jerry Falwell also said, you cannot be a part of the moral majority without being committed to the state of Israel and Jews.
God's chosen people, the Jews. I pray that we shall always support Israel. Not just because Israel is our best friend in the Middle East, and they are. Not just because it is, in a mercenary sense, the best investment of our dollars to strengthen Israel. Rather than put our own troops there, Israel does a pretty good job of keeping the peace in the Middle East. But more than that, theologically, God has promised to bless us if we bless them.
I always find this topic very interesting when it comes to Christian Zionism because it's conflicting things at once. Because a lot of evangelical, like Christian nationalists, fall into a lot of conspiracy theories that involve being extremely anti-Semitic and like hateful towards Jewish people in general. But at the same time, they feel like they have to support Israel because they think it's going to usher in the end times. They think they have to do that to follow the playbook of what's going to happen towards the end of the world. It's very morbid, but it's just interesting to watch those two things conflict with each other. With that specific topic of Christian Zionism, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance that goes into supporting Israel while also simultaneously not liking the people in it. Very weird. He also fought against gay people holding public office, teaching in schools, etc. That's not very shocking. Now, the only thing that Jerry Falwell Sr. did advocate for that we don't see much in blatant ways is pushing back against civil rights and desegregation. And there's actually a reason for this. And that is, so when we go back to when I first started talking about Falwell, when he created that school that was whites only, a lot of Christian schools actually did that. It was the biggest boom of private Christian schools in the United States. And this was a direct result of the desegregation of public schools. A lot of them did not want black kids going to school with their white kids. So they created these white Christian schools and said it was within their religious rights to do so. And after a while, so these schools were tax exempt. After a while, our government started saying, all right, you have to comply with the desegregation of schools or we're going to take away your tax exempt status. That's why you stop seeing schools push for this, because they wanted their tax exemption, which is so crazy. Bob Jones University was interesting to read about because they started allowing black students in their school, but then they said that they couldn't ever do there could never be any interracial relationships, and then they also got in trouble for that, so then they finally gave it up.
Why they can't date?
Well, being a Bible-believing institution, Larry, we try to base things on Bible principle. The problem we have today is that our principle is so greatly misunderstood. People think we don't let them date because we're racist. No, to be racist, you have to treat people differently. We don't. We don't let them date because we were trying, as an example, to enforce something, a principle that is much greater than this. We stand against the one world government, against the coming world of Antichrist, which is a one world system, a blending of all differences, a blending of national differences, economic differences, church differences, into a big one ecumenical world. Okay, the Bible's very clear about this. We said, you know, way back years ago when we first had a problem, which was, by the way, we started this principle back in the mid-50s. I was a college student at BJU at the time, and it was with an Asian and Caucasian. We didn't even have black students for another 15 years, so it was not put there as a black thing. I think people need to understand that.
So the fear of one world relates back to two people dating?
Yeah. We realize that an interracial marriage is not going to bring in the world the Antichrist by any means. But if we as Christians stand for Christ and not Antichrist, and we see, you know, we're against the one world church. We're against one economy, one political system. We see what the Bible says about this. So we say, okay, if they're going to blend this world, and interracial marriage is a genetic blending, which is a very definite sort of blending, we said, let's put this policy in here, because we're against the one world church. And way back 17 years ago when I was on your program, I was saying on programs all across America, we're not going to the Supreme Court fighting for our rule and our policy. We're fighting for our right to it. There's a religious freedom issue. That's all we ever
You're a
fought for.
private institution. You don't get the tax benefit because what you are entitled to the thing. I'm trying to find out why you have the rule.
We have the rule because it was a part of a bigger, it wasn't the rule itself. We can't point to a verse in the Bible that says you shouldn't date or marry interracial.
You can't back it up.
No, we can't back it up with a verse in the Bible. We never have tried to. We never have tried to do that.
That's a big reason as to why a lot of them don't do that anymore, but there's still so much racism and white supremacy in the evangelical Christian nationalist movement, and I don't think a lot of people realize why that is or what the roots of that is, because I know I didn't for a long time. And also those documentaries I was watching just really opened my eyes to a lot of things, and doing research into it. It made me think of recent events for a lot of different reasons. Number one, the Sunday after Charlie Kirk died, I saw a lot of people coming to a really sad realization that racism was not a deal breaker for their church. So I think I saw about 7 videos of black women specifically talking about they were disappointed because they were going to predominantly white churches and they didn't realize that they would completely excuse racism the way they did, because a lot of these churches did like a 10 to 15 minute segment on Charlie Kirk and how he was such a martyr for God and how he was like God's soldier, and kind of like painted him as this saint and used him to be like a Christian martyr figure. And I think they were blown away at the fact that they could completely ignore a lot of the very racist things that he said.
If we would have said that Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously.
And say to them, hey, this isn't a deal breaker for us. We still think he's like this great man of God. And it's still just so, the racism and white supremacy is just still so heavily ingrained in these spaces. For a while, I think it was like easier to hide. But I think with recent events, it's getting harder for them to hide it. And some of them just blatantly agree with stuff that Charlie Kirk has said. I cannot tell you how many white Christians I've seen say that, like, I agree with, like, everything he had to say. And I'm like, okay. I have a lot of people argue with me on other social media platforms saying, oh, he didn't say that all about all black women. He just said that about specific ones. He named 4 black women, and that's not a coincidence that they were all black. Let's just be honest with ourselves. That's not a coincidence. Also, if he truly believed if he truly wasn't saying it like that, and he was saying, oh, well, everybody should just get their positions based on merit and hard work, he wouldn't have called it a white person's position. Because he's telling you directly, he sees it as a white person's position. I don't know how clear he could have been. On top of that, we know he said civil rights was a mistake, and I just think a lot of people were shocked that all of that was being glossed over. And I genuinely think that everything that's been going on this past week is like the Trump admin's Christian nationalist wet dream, right? Because they have this so-called perfect martyr now they can display, and they can use their religion to protect from any criticism as like an overall blanket. So you can't say anything negative about him because he was this man of God. He gave his life for Christianity and righteousness, and that's why he died. Because all Christians are being persecuted. We know it's more complex than that. But even if you say, I don't think he deserved to die, I don't believe in this kind of violence, they still don't want you to criticize him in any way because now he is this 2D character that was a saint and a warrior of God. He didn't say anything racist, he didn't say anything hateful, which we know is not true. This is a big tool that's going to be used in the rise of authoritarianism we're seeing right now, because they can use this to further push this idea of these people are demonic, these people are our enemy, we're the righteous ones, we have divine authority. That's why I think it's important for people to watch the documentary Apocalypse in the Tropics, because it shows how often authoritarian leaders are constantly using religion in that way to get people to support them, because they're telling people they have the divine authority. They have the authority from God himself. And what higher authority can you have than from the creator of the universe? You know what I mean? And again, religion is used as a shield from any kind of criticism, and it's also super easy to dismiss anybody who agrees with you if you just name them as demonic and claim that it's even more about politics. It's spiritual warfare. This is good versus evil. We're the good guys. We're the good guys, they're evil. Things become very simplified, and people then feel like it's like a war. It's not politics, it's not disagreement, it's a war. It's a war between good and evil. So that is where I want to stop today. There's more I want to talk about in regards to Christian nationalism and looking into that. But I just think it's important that we know the roots of this and how it's developed. Oftentimes I look back at my childhood and I can slowly see the development getting us to this point, and that's so interesting. A lot of people in the past 10 years have had a shock of realizing what they were really a part of. Like I know I did, where the Christian nationalism became more apparent, the hatred became more apparent. You saw all this sanctified hatred, this holy hatred in the name of God, and I was like, holy shit, what am I a part of? And I know a lot of other people felt that way too. And I think right now it's also a pivotal point with stuff happening with Charlie Kirk and how they're watching him get turned into the perfect martyr. But yeah, I want to know how you guys have been feeling this week with everything. I guess one thing I've been struggling with is knowing how worried to be. And I guess there is no way to know really how worried to be. But I just know with the Jimmy Kimmel basically being fired due to pressure from Trump and stuff, and talking a lot about hate speech being illegal, and Donald Trump saying, I'm not so sure, when asked if people still have their First Amendment.
A lot of comments for doing that. They still have their First Amendment right, though. They're still out there protesting.
It's all very scary. I just want to know how you guys are dealing with it, what your thoughts and feelings are on it, and I will be making more videos in the future. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope that you guys are hanging in there. I really do. I know times are hard, but I don't want any of you to lose hope, because this isn't the end, and I hope that you guys remember that.